Welcome back, everyone. So the purpose of this integrity session here is to highlight and examine the general processes that we will use to complete the activity assignment number 6, which you can find located in Blackboard right here towards the bottom. This will be also the location that we can save our lab write-ups to and whatnot as well. So in the prior session, we examined what the assignment was about in the overview video, but just as a recap, for folks, if you missed that, I encourage you to go back and watch that. But in general, and the agenda here as well, the idea for the activity assignment number 6 will be to conduct a utility condition assessment in a study area of your choice. So the size of that area largely depends on making sure there's a lot of variable utilities in that particular area. So we're looking at maybe a city block or a campus or a large open space, common area, something like that, where you might have light poles, storm drains, fire hydrants, things like that, and or street signs and whatnot, power poles. So there'll be 5 different types of utility features that we'll be giving you in the data collector app for this week. So see if you could think about a study area that will incorporate enough of those features, maybe 5 or 10 of each. Ideally, in some instances, you may not have, for example, power poles in your study area. That's okay. You just won't have that feature then. But you might find more of an abundance of storm drains. So try to do a really good job at collecting all of those that are in your study area. So to make this lab really truly effective, I'm thinking if you have 5 or 10 points of each one of those features, that will be ideal for this, at least at a minimum, just to make the data and make the descriptive analysis at the end of the lab a little bit more rewarding, a little bit more meaningful. You'll be able to see the results of that a little bit more clearly. So the idea, once you select a study area that is rich with storm drains or light poles or something like that, some good utility features, a good blend of those, is that we'll go ahead and collect those using the collector app for ArcGIS. This will be the same app that we used last week for our last lab, except we're really not worried about elevation too much. And instead, we're just interested in recording that location. So we'll literally be pushing a point, collecting that location, recording who it was that collected the data. So if it was me, it would show up as John in there, and then recording the condition of that utility feature. So if you want to work with someone, either the 2 of you may, or 3 of you, depending how you want to do that, make sure that you have a standardized process to accurately communicate or record what exactly is a really good looking feature in terms of excellent condition, or what defines poor condition. And you'll see that right down here on the page. And we went through that in the overview video a little bit as well, but make sure you have a good process to define what that means. So looking at the paint of the feature, maybe rust might be present, the condition around that feature, maybe there's a lot of grass, weeds growing up, obstructing the view of something, of a feature. Maybe the concrete base is chipped and the light pole's tipping or something like that. Maybe it's burnt out. Maybe the sign, you can't read the lettering on the particular feature. Those would all be subjective judgment calls that you will have to make to define a condition according to these 3 ranking scenarios here. So in your lab write-up, you can also augment and define a little bit further, discuss what went into your decision-making process to call a feature a 3 or a 2 or a 1. But 3 would be something that's excellent condition. There's really no issues with it. It's good to go. Part of our inventory is fine. We don't need to worry about this. We collected this particular feature. It's good for this year. Maybe a feature would be categorized as a number 2, that it's functional. There's no real immediate problems with it, but maybe there are some paint issues that need to be touched up, or a sign is cracked or chipped. Part of it might be falling off, or there's some bolts missing on the sign, so it's kind of hanging there, but needs a little bit of attention, but it's still functional. And then 1 obviously is just plain poor. The sign's knocked down, you cannot read anything on the sign. the light's burnt out or what have you, it's leaning sideways, ready to tip over, those kind of things there. But you'll have to use a subjective process to do this. So again, if you're working with someone, make sure that you have this process standardized so that you all are uh, recording that in the same manner if you're collecting different points in the same study area with a group of you or a partner or something. Otherwise, the lab itself will be you just analyzing your own data. You are not going to be responsible for looking at my data or another group member's data. So that's why we want to try to create a really rich pool of data that you can look at. So you have all of your fire hydrants. You might have 10, 15 of those. You might have all of your light poles. You might have 10, 12 of those. You might have storm drains. You might have 15 of those in your study area. But the idea is that you can then describe the condition of all of those features individually, in a layer, like an individual shapefile layer, and then you could look at them all aggregated together so that you might see on your map in your study area, you might see densities of points that are really, really poor. And if so, what are those utility features? Are they all the same utility feature? Maybe it's time to replace them all. Maybe they're storm covers or storm drains. Maybe they all need replacement. Or maybe there's no spatial difference in them. Maybe they're all just uniformly scattered in terms of their condition. Some are good, some are poor, or maybe all are just twos. So that's the idea, is really to conduct a descriptive analysis. So there won't be so much of a huge spatial element to this. Rather, more or less, let me look at the individual features within their own category, their own type, like fire hydrants, storm drains, power poles, light poles, looking at all those features individually, and then looking at them collectively as a whole as well. So purely a little bit more of a descriptive analysis that's supplemented with some lightweight visuals in there. Maybe it's pie charts, or really be creative with that for yourself and how you want to share your story. So to begin on this, there are two guides. Now I'm going through the iOS guide and the Android guide. Much of this will be the same from last week in terms of setup and protocol. But right now, I just opened up the iOS version because that's what I had and worked with. So a lot of the text that you see on the beginning page is what we already covered in the welcome video, and then also what I just narrated over a little bit there as well. So purely, again, what are we doing? What are we going to need, which would be our app, and utility features, thinking about our study area, and then how are you going to rank these according to some of the parameters above up here. So each feature will get assigned really two things: who it was that collected it, and a number for the feature for its condition. Either it's excellent, acceptable, or poor. Simple as that. Okay. And then we talked about the rest of this here. So this lab should be a little bit easier for folks. But in general, just to briefly highlight a few of these things, again, we're using the same app, so it'll be the new collector, not the classic, but the new one. And then the sign in. So we'll say to everybody, pause here, stop, and remember this, that you will be logging in with the smumn.user. So I'm going to highlight that down here. A few folks missed that last week, and that really kind of derailed them. So make sure that you have the smumn.user for both the username and the password. So the third step here will be to, once you're logged to arcgis.com, or to your app rather, you should see the utility and sign collection for 2019. I had some older data up here I was maybe going to use as a backup, but we're not going to use the 2018 data, so disregard that. Here's the one that we want, the utility and sign collection for 2019. The default settings for GPS are set to automatic, but you can certainly explore those if you wish. Just like before, whether you're using an Android or an iOS on your iPhone, you'll need to activate your location services for this lab. So part of the expectation, I guess, will be is that you'll have either some type of Wi-Fi connectivity or cellular connectivity from which to upload and submit your data to the map service that we'll be working with, which is this one right here, the utility and sign collection. So activate your location services or make sure that you have Wi-Fi connectivity if you're in an area that does have spanning Wi-Fi. Just like before, if the position fix is under 30, uh, you'll see probably a little red symbol that's under 30. But if you're outdoors right now, you should be okay. And once the position fix is under 30, you'll be able to collect your feature, collect your utility feature with this little blue button. So it's literally tapping that just like you did for week 5 there with our elevation activity. So the next item or the next dialog or the next box rather that will appear then once you push that little collect button will be for you to select which feature you are collecting. So if you are collecting a fire hydrant, you'll simply select the fire hydrant. And in that case, as I mentioned here just a bit ago, and as with last week as well, this references last week's elevation point, so don't be too alarmed with that. But the red purely is an illustration here showing you that you may get software's not going to like you. And so you do have the ability to move that by simply touching the screen and dragging that white circle over where your position really is if you need to do that. But upon clicking the fire hydrant, in this example right here, I've clicked the fire hydrant. Next, click on the collector and the collector comments. So there's really only 2 boxes in here, as I mentioned. One is a collector, in other words, who it is that's collecting the feature. All of you should have your name out here. So go ahead. For me, it would be clicking on my name. So for you, it would be clicking on your name. And then you'll see your name populate here. And then the second box where we would want to type into here is a collector comments. And it is this location right here. Let me just scroll down a bit. It will be in the second box is where you will give that feature a score of its condition. So over here, we were collecting a fire hydrant. So here, give that particular fire hydrant a score. Either it's in great condition, there's no issues, as shown down here, or maybe it's a 2, which is acceptable, it's functional, but maybe there's some issues that need to be tended with eventually, or 1, it's poor, and we really somebody needs to get out here and take care of this problem here, or the feature. Something's not right with it. So you will be giving that a score, a 1, 2, or a 3. After you do that, simply update your point if necessary, and then select submit. So basically uploads your feature. And if that option is unavailable, as we mentioned above, that red circle might be apparent if you're under 30 feet. So in which case you'll have to manually move that circle, as I mentioned, update your point as shown, and then submit that. Just like last week, if you do need to modify or move or delete a point that you collected, simply tap on that feature on your screen, and then the 3 dots here will either be down in the corner or maybe up here where it's shown, and then you can either edit that, delete it, modify it, or what have you. So simple as that for each one of your utility points. We're looking for, I don't know, at least 5 to 10 of each one of those features if they're there in your study area. And so after that, what we'll do is you'll come back and log into arcgis.com, and then be sure that you enter your smumn.user account for both your password and your login. So let's go ahead and do that. Well, we'll take a look at what's coming here first. So just as before, once we get logged in, we'll go to our gallery and look for our utility sign collection for 2019. And then, as we did before under ArcGIS Desktop, we'll select Open in ArcMap. So that's what we'll want to do. So I'll demo that out. And then we'll download and open that item file there. And again, if prompted, we'll use our smumn.user credentials. So I'll demonstrate those steps right here. So let's go ahead and go to www.arcgis.com, and let's go ahead and sign in. So remember, for our sign in right here, we want our smumn.user for both our login and our password. Whoops. Try that again. smumn.user. Sign in. Okay. Now we'll go up to gallery. And let's run a search for our utility. Okay. Thought it was utility. What did we have there? Utility and sign collection. So let's look for that. Okay, there we are. So that's what we want. So let's go ahead and open that up and just look at it there. Okay, so there's a view count of 39, and maybe some folks are already in there taking a peek at that or using it, and that's great. And then open in ArcGIS Desktop, we'll say open in ArcMap. Then you'll notice down here that item file was generated. So what I'll do here is I'm going to come back into my downloads, and we'll go right up here right away, and we'll open up that file, and our ArcMap session should open up. And I already have a current session open here, so we'll wait for another one to come up. Okay, so I have a new ArcMap session open. So once you download that file, double click on that, and hopefully your ArcMap session will open up. I was working with someone last week who was going through that process, and the process was correct, but ArcMap wasn't opening up. So what we had to do to get the data to load, if that does happen to you, in this case, we're streaming in here just fine, but if that does happen to you where that item file is not opening up ArcMap, you can go open up ArcMap itself and then add data here from ArcGIS Online. And so if we did that, then we would search ArcGIS Online for the utility collector and then add our points that way if we wanted to do it in that manner. So, all right, so we're up and running right here, and I just wanted to show you that process. I have some of the other features and whatnot already up over here, so we'll do that. I'm just going to hide some of these here for us for now so we can see what this looks like and show you the steps and how we made all this possible. So once we have the service being streamed in here from our application, you'll see that we have all of our, well, I don't have a ton of features here. So again, ideally you want 10, 15, 5, 10 minimum, I think, there of each feature if they are, if they're there, if they exist in your study area. So let's go ahead and go down to number 22. And once we're in ArcMap here, I like to examine your points, examine your data, take a look at them, see what's all there. Look at the photos, if there are photos associated with that, and so just kind of explore that. It's fun to look at these. If there's a fire hydrant here, you can examine what that is. There, it looks like there's an attachment with that. Let's go ahead and check out the fire hydrant here that was uploaded. And so in this case right here, this in this particular fire hydrant, I think, did I give that a 2? Yeah, maybe a 2 there. So, in looking at the photo, it helps us to kind of get a sense of why was it a 2. Maybe there, I think on the back side as well, there's some rust and paint flaking off, but otherwise, it's generally functional. So no problem with that. And quite honestly, there's being that that's a little bit subjective, nobody could tell you that you are wrong. Just, if you have a category 3, just specify what went into that categorization of such. So I like to explore this. And now keep in mind, right now, I should probably be the only one that has data in here. But as the week goes on, you might find other people with data in there as well. So know that I'm in here now, but we'll have 10 other people, 12 other people collecting data in here, unless you're working in a group or something like that. So the idea is when you find your data, the next step really in our document is to select your points out. And that's what number 23 is exploring, or what that's sharing. So go in there and select out your points. So we want to be able to edit and explore and kind of tinker with our own data. So what you can do is either highlight all these, or do a simple query, for your select by attributes, maybe looking for the collector. If you were to say the collector and then record, who it is and whatnot. But for me, since I'm the only one in here right now, you can do it in this manner. Just zoom into your area this way, select your rows, or you could simply zoom into your area like this. Oops, not like that. Here, like this. We'll clear our selected features and take our select tool. If you're zoomed into your own area with your points, you can simply do that too, to select your features. And then what we can do is we'll right click on the layer in the table of contents and export our data. So I think I have a graphic of what that looks like right here again. And so simply right clicking and then exporting our data. So right up here, I'm going to right click and then export my data. So one of the things that you'll want to do is to make sure, as I highlighted here, is to make sure that you have all of your data going into the same workspace, or to the same location. So be sure that you're saving all of your data, when you're exporting your data or whatever it is that you're doing, not only in this lab or this class, but really in any class. Keep all of your data together. That's your map documents, that's everything. Make sure you know where those things are being saved, because it'll make things a lot easier for you if there are problems. If you're saving files or you're trying to open up files and something's not there, you wonder why it is. So do a lot of the hard work up front and just make sure that all of your data is going into the same file, the same working directory. And then also make sure that you don't have any spaces in that directory as well. So for example, week space 6 space materials, get rid of those spaces and maybe have underbars in there instead. So it's just good practice to try to get into that type of behavior there. So then export your data as a shapefile, and that's where I'm at right now. Excuse me. So go ahead and save this out, give that an appropriate name. So for me, this would be week 6 utility data. So I'm taking all of my features, fire hydrants, street signs, power or utility power poles and all that, and I'm exporting those out as one layer. And when I did that, so I'm just going to clear selected features here. And so when I exported those out, this is what I had. I had week 6 utility data. So this week 6 utility data is the same data as what was being streamed from our service there. It just happened that we exported all of my data out here so that I now can use it and edit it in one shapefile. So what I like to do, once again, is check my attributes, explore all of my data. And here I'm able to see all of my features, what I collected. I don't believe the photos will be, the photos are brought over from this, because those are stored in the service where we uploaded those to. But I think you could probably conduct a little, I'd have to look to see how to do that. It's been a little while on how to create a hyperlink to that. Let me double check here. Let me see. I don't think the photos will come through. Maybe they will, but I doubt it. No, so We'll have to figure out to run a hyperlink basically in here if you want to bring the photos in. Otherwise, you just have to go back to your original streaming service here to pull those photos out. But now where we're at, what I would recommend doing, and it's up to you, but I would highly recommend doing this so it's a little bit easier to work with, is in number 24 here, but parse out. In other words, select all of your fire hydrants. First select all of your fire hydrants from your attribute table in your new shapefile here that you just created. Export that data out as a new shapefile so that you'll have a fire hydrant shapefile. Do the same thing for your street signs. Do the same thing for your storm drains. Do the same thing for your power or utility poles. Do the same thing for, I said, street signs or your street lights, or light poles or whatever. So that's where I'm referring to the 5 sets of data. You may not have 5 if you didn't have any electrical utility lines, then you're not going to have that as a data set. So then you'll have maybe 4. So a lot of it just depends on the features that are found in your study area. But again, select the study area that you know there's going to be an ample amount so that you can collect a lot of good data. So what I'm demonstrating here is a process to do that. So if I show you, in this case, how I'm going to subset out my fire hydrants, for example, what I'm going to do is open up my attribute table, and I'm going to select just a simple select by attributes. So this is kind of second nature to many people, but it's good for a review. And all I'm going to do is look for my feature type, which is right here. So this heading, feature type. So I'm going to double click on that, and then is equal to. Then you have to select get unique values. And for me, in this case, we want our fire hydrant. So you'll do this for each one of these. So you have your light pole, your power pole, your street sign, and your storm drain. So let's double click on fire hydrant. So this is what our query will look like, and then apply. And now we have all of our fire hydrants selected. So once that is done, right click on your main shapefile there that contains all of your utility features. Let's go down to data, export data. Once again, make sure you save that or save all of these in the same location. And then we call this fire hydrants. So for me, you can see that already existing over here in the table of contents. So go ahead and save that out. And now what we'll see will be our fire hydrants. And I changed the symbology on that. And you'll see that over here in the lab guide as well. So we kind of talked you through this to select the feature type and repeat that for each one of your utility features that you collected. And we got to this point here. And then what we did is I just demonstrated this process right here. Right click, export that data from your main shapefile there. And then you'll have your features. So for us in this case, it was our fire hydrant. So select a symbol style that works best for you. And in order to do that, a couple of ways you could do that. You could double click on the little symbol there below the shapefile, or you could right click on the shapefile and go into properties and then go into your symbol selector and modify your symbol in that way as well. If you want to leave them as little dots, by all means, leave them as little dots. That's okay. We're just trying to bring in some different aspects here for you to consider if you want to. So use what works best for you. But for me, in this case, just simply left click or double click on that symbol. And if you're interested in fire hydrants, let's see if they should have that here, fire hydrant. And there's our fire hydrant. So again, this is just an optional thing to do. If you do select the red fire hydrant like me, you'll want to make sure that you change the size. The size originally I think is pretty small. It might be like a size of 2 or something, and I want to show you what that looks like. It's pretty tiny. You may not be able to see that. So we can't really see a lot of our fire hydrants in here because they're so darn tiny. So even if you zoomed in, there's one right there, but just really, really small. So if that happens to you, make sure that you go in there and just adjust the size of that symbol so that you can see all of your features a little bit more. So same thing with your dots and your points, make them large enough so that you can see those. I'm just going to deselect, clear our features there. So what this means right here, all these dots are fire hydrants. Not all the dots, but all the dots with the little fire hydrant over them are our fire hydrants. So what you want to do now is go back through your original shapefile here and go ahead and subset out all of your other individual features. For example, light poles. There are all my light poles that I collected. So there are many, many more light poles in this area that I did not collect. I would recommend going back, if this were me, to this area and making sure that I have a lot of the light poles collected, because that would be more of a complete inventory that you can run a descriptive analysis on, rather than having some of these so spread out. So keep that in mind as you're working through that. I did have a few power poles in here as well, and some of these were not exactly true power poles, but they were poles that had power on them. So that would be something that I would want to clarify in my write-up. So, this was not a true, these were true utility poles. I'll see if I can pull those up here and just show you what those were like with the photograph over here. We'll turn these off for the time being. These were true big power poles. Let's look at what these look like here. So these were true power poles. And so in your example or in your write-up, if there was a differentiation between your power poles, you'd want to suggest what those were. So for me, I also collected a power pole here just because there were not a lot of them on campus here. So my category was, these are still light poles, but there are power to those light poles, obviously for the light, but also for auxiliary use. So you'll have to make that call. Just make sure that you're clear in how you are defining each one of your features. And that's where the photos can be really good evidence to use in your write-up. Okay, I'll collapse this and open the rest of these up. I did not have any storm drains, but we did have light poles as shown, fire hydrants. So I was able to collect most of the fire hydrants. I think there were a couple more over here and in back that I could have collected as well. And then the power poles, and then there, oh gosh, there's a ton of street signs, parking signs, things like that. So I obviously did not get even close to the greater number of street signs. So Winona folks, if you wanted to, for example, you could go to the same area and collect the points that I missed and use that as a greater network of points, to conduct your analysis on, and fill in some of these other areas around here, or continue kind of expanding down around campus here and really creating a greater density of each one of these features and storm drains or something like that too. So once again, you do not have to have these exact symbols. They are just there to show you as a way of differentiating your features so you could see them. Little circles that are colored, those would be just fine as well. So let's come back over here to our lab guide. And then step 25, we're almost to the end. I have, for you might have 4 or 5 individual shapefiles, just like I did, that illustrates the different features that are shown, maybe with different symbols if you want. Like I said, circles are fine too. So the next step then is to explore each one of your individual shapefiles. So we were looking at fire hydrants, for example. If I open up the attribute table, this field right here, called the collector 1 field, this was the field that you provided a rank for. So as you explore this field right here, you'll notice that I did not have any 1s, or for fire hydrants that were classified as a score of 1 in this case. So it doesn't mean that this information is not valuable, but instead maybe I'm looking for any fire hydrant that it's a 2 or less. Maybe all my 3s are fine. And so you could identify those in here if you want to see where are all my fire hydrants that are 2s or 1s. In this case, I could see, all right, here's a 2, here's a 2, here's a 2, but the remaining fire hydrants seem to be in pretty good shape. So that's what I'm saying, like the greater number of these features you have, you'll have a greater array of descriptive attributes that you can then write up or categorize and look at. So in the next, let me just clear the selected features here. So everything is selected, or deselected rather. I'm going to come back to the lab guide. So I kind of commented on that approach here. Maybe I was looking at street signs though, I think in that example. But in the example shown on the lab guide, I discuss the process of saying, maybe you want to highlight or showcase all those features that were a score of 1, or maybe 2 or less, or less than or equal to 2. So, and identify those. And I did that with my street signs. And unknowingly, when I was doing that, I looked at all my what did I have there? Light poles, or what were they? Street signs. So street signs here are what I was looking at. And all the street signs that I did look at, which was hardly the entirety of all of them that were there, but when I looked at these, I found that a lot of the actual lights here were found to be 2s or less. They're kind of clustered in this area here. So that gave me an indication that there might be something out there that, I have some of my power poles on here too, and fire hydrants. That's why some of these might be kind of overlapping here. But in general, you can see that there was a large cluster of light poles or whatever I was looking at here that were found to be in a maybe a poor condition. So that would be something that you could take note of. So I kind of describe that here a little bit. So I highlighted all the features that score a 2 or less in my tiny little data set here. And so this might be something to flag out in a little visual, maybe of your street signs. Maybe it's of your fire hydrants as well. And then maybe it's all of your features together. Where are there features that scored a 1 or a 2? Are they all clumped together like that? Is there a reason why? So just kind of something interesting that we can examine from our data that we're collecting. So number 27 shows an example. This is purely an example. If you want to do something purely visual and just showing those little areas where 1s are clustered with your fire hydrants, where you have 1s and 2 clustered for your street signs, where you have 1s or maybe it's 3s for your storm drains or something, that's fine. If you just want to show graphics for each of those individually, and then maybe collectively, in 1 page each of your write-up, so 1 page in your lab write-up, you might talk about fire hydrants. The next page, you might talk about street signs. Next page, you may talk about storm drains, so on and so forth. So you could have a couple sample graphics in there for your description or your little descriptive analysis on fire hydrants. And then you could have something that looks like this here on the screen. So you might say, so for my street signs, I took a look at my street sign shapefile and I looked at all my features, and all of my features, when I looked at my street signs here, let's come back over to street signs. Let's open up our attributes. I'm looking at my collector ranking, and I have 6 of them in here. So half of them were a score of 2. And that's where this came from. Just simply taking the percentage. So half of my features were scored or ranked as acceptable with some minor issues. And then 2 of them had a rank of 3 for my street signs. So if we come back over here, we'll see that a couple features for my street signs were really generally pretty good. They're really, you couldn't ask for anything more probably. And so highlighted that 33% of them were approximately of excellent condition. And then there was 1 sign that was pretty poor. and basically the signage, you couldn't even see it. The sign was cracked. You couldn't see what the sign was communicating at all. So you might want to incorporate something similar to this for your signs, your fire hydrants, and then maybe collectively as a whole. So I'm just trying to give you some ideas for how you may respond to that inventory. And then this is just purely another thing to consider. Do you have to make a graph or a pie chart or something? No, but if you're a little bit more advanced and you have some GIS background or you have some experience with Excel and working with data, I encourage you to try this. All these assignments are scalable. So, push yourself a little bit, kind of go above and beyond if you want. This is not the limit, of course. You could go way beyond this even. But in order to create, if folks did want to create, I have a description for how to create a chart in ArcMap. But if you want to go into Excel or another utility of your choice, please feel free to do that if you have another software platform that works for you. But what you'll need to do in order to create a chart or a infographic or something like that inside of ArcMap is take a look at what I have on the screen. Let me pull up fire hydrants since we were talking about that briefly. So here's my fire hydrants. My fire hydrants, you'll notice that I do not have, well, I have a collector field right here. And if we look at that, let's take a look at the properties of this field. You'll notice that this is a string. So there's probably not going to be a lot of numerical analysis or summary statistics or anything like that that we can do because it is a string. So let me close this. So what you can do, and I provided an example, and this is also illustrated in the Word document there too, is that I ended up just going into this attribute table and creating a new field called rank. I custom created this, and all I did to do that was go in and say add field, just like what you maybe did with your total station. So, and create it as a short integer. And this is purely so that we have a numeric attribute field that we can use to generate some statistics off of or something numeric. So you can create that right here. And then all I did from that point was start editing. And of course, we're interested in, if you want to do this for all of your individual layers, select OK, and then simply going in here to each one. And then all I did was I just took the rank score and just typed them in, followed by enter. So 3, 2, again, make sure you click enter after every time going through here. Whoops, that was a 1, and then 3, and then stop editing. Oops, save edit, stop editing. And now you have a field over here that you could generate some statistics, some stats on. So I don't know how helpful this will be here if we look at that, but simply right click on your field right here. So I right click and went to statistics. You could also maybe do some summary information there too, based on the rank. So the min, the max, I don't know how helpful that is there, but you have one here that's, a couple that are 3, and then I don't know there. Well, I'd have to look at that a little more to see if that's meaningful. But so to use or to generate some type of a histogram or a bar chart or something like that, what we'd want to do is to click this table options drop down. So if you hover your mouse over that, you'll see it says table options. So if we select the drop down, we can go down here to create graph. Again, you do not need to do this. This is just purely an option here. And then, the value field for us, the numeric field that we're interested in will be our rank. And so we can label our axes in here with maybe our feature ID. And of course, our rank is here, a score from 0, 1, 2, or 3, excellent to not so good down here, whatever that feature was. And then, of course, we can create a color scheme if we want with a custom palette in here, or with a palette or a custom choice as well. So these are just examples for what you can do if you're interested in creating a, a graphic or something like that to explore your data a little bit more, in which case you kind of see, okay, I had one feature, I had a couple features that were 3, a lot of them right at 2, meaning acceptable, and one was really poor. So if you wanted to do that, you could, and generate a little title here for it, and there you'd have a graphic that you could embed or copy or whatnot, and copy as a graphic to paste in your report. But again, you do not need to do this, but if you're a little bit more advanced, I encourage you to take advantage of some of these ways to incorporate some different visualizations in your write-up, maybe infographics or something like that. So that is a briefing on the last step right there. And so number 28 then would be to see your agenda and incorporate some of those aspects, just like we did with other lab write-ups, like with our introduction, methods, results, discussion, etc. And then incorporate some of the visuals that we looked at here just now, and how you best how you want to choose to share your story. So again, this is not going to be a lot of hardcore super spatial analysis, but it's going to be a lot of descriptive analysis based on your actual field measurements, your field observations. So how you want to highlight and share that story is really up to you. There's no wrong answer to do that. I think there'll just be better ways to do that. And so we highlighted a couple of approaches here that you may want to consider. So if you have any questions on any of this or run into any problems, please let me know. I think all the iOS and the Android functions should be relatively the same. And it's just purely a kind of a continuation there of where we last left off from last week, but we're just flipping the scale here. Oh, and another thing too, if you are a little bit more advanced and you want to, for example, calculate the elevation for your street signs, go ahead and create an elevation field in here as a floating point. So if you wanted to, you could add a new field in here and call that, elevation. If you wanted to record the elevation of your field, and create a float, precision 5 there, probably scale of 2 again, similar to what we did for total station. I'm going to enter through those, and from here you could go in and I think probably calculate your geometry, and just like what we did before, and record your elevation from that with a Z field. Actually, where is our Z here? I might have to look into that. That's not, maybe that needed to be specified, so I take that back. But maybe there is something you could do with added geometry or polygons or something like that. So I'll maybe see if I could check into this. If folks have interest, let me know, and I'll do some digging on that as to why maybe that's not there. But nevertheless, that's a brief overview on our activity assignment number 6. So if anybody, again, has any questions, let me know. Otherwise, happy utility mapping, and hopefully you'll have a little bit of fun with this and be creative as you want to be. So please work with a partner if you so do wish, and otherwise we'll see you again soon. Thank you.